Hello, you sexy camels. Welcome back to the Dev Optimist channel. I hope you've got your water like me. I had to put this at the top here because I forgot the name of my own channel. But in the first video, I just introduced a bit about what I hope to cover. So this channel is about software development and in particular web development, and my specialization within web dev is front end work. So let's go ahead and get into the topic today. This first tutorial is about refactoring, and I think that's a very important skill and process that I've seen happen a lot in my work, and it's something that I try to implement with my own projects because you really need to think of them as a bit of a work of art where you might work on something and make it good and make it work well, but then later you're just curious, like, could you make it a little bit better or perform a bit differently if you adjust something, or you might get some feedback on it and from ChatGPT or someone else saying, you know, maybe you should consider doing it this way for these reasons. So the the website that I want to share today is my personal portfolio site, which is a work in progress. But I actually created my portfolio site based off a template that I made recently when I challenged myself to make a completely HTML, CSS, and JavaScript template that would kind of go back to my roots of studying web development and make a very simple yet fast and well performing site with very low with images that are optimized and you know small file sizes, just to get a blazingly fast portfolio site, because I've been working with newer tech including React for quite a long time in some different projects, and that definitely has a place because there's a lot you can do with these new frameworks and technologies where you can use the browser as more of a JavaScript runtime environment, which it already has its own uh, JavaScript runtime environment, but they're really using it a lot more to do things like control the state of the application and allow a lot of data to be constantly refreshed, or choose specifically what you want to refresh, and handle how you're getting the data, whether you're getting it from the server or handling it more client side. So there's a lot that can be done with modern technology, but really, if we go back to the fundamentals of the web, and even something like a WordPress site, it boils down to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, and even TypeScript gets compiled to, actually, compiled is not the right word, but um, transpiled to JavaScript through a process. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's check out what a web template could look like. So when I started a brand new project with WebStorm here, my IDE, it spit out an HTML template that had these things and some other files that I deleted. But really, the structure is an index HTML file, kind of the backbone, the structure of the document, and then the JavaScript. Typically, you would have at least one JavaScript file that will get referenced inside that HTML file. CSS for styling also gets imported at the top, usually in the head. So I'm not seeing it on this one. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is pretty typical for when people are learning about making websites, and it really is still what a lot of websites boil down to, is a structure like this. But so that's what I chose for my portfolio project. So just to open it up and give a look, this is my the basic part of my portfolio project. I put some content into the hero section here. Still not sure if I like the black and white colors with the background image, but the other sections I just have sort of a skeleton template. Although the JavaScript functionality is working and it's got a form. So I think I've got the bones of my portfolio site here, but I want to talk about the structure because that's how I came into this refactoring topic. So this site, if we look at it, if I open up the site here, I actually want to get the previous version of it. So I'm going to check out. There's my project. So I can see that I did my refactoring today, but what I want to get is this commit before I did the refactoring. So I'm going to copy that commit hash. We'll just check it out. Okay. So you're going to see my basically my file structure just reverted to how it was before. So I want to just show what my code was like before. So I've got my index HTML file. And for this section, if we just talk about what it has a nav bar, it's got a hero section, the button, take us down to the about us, the about section, services, there's these cards, projects similar to services, just some content, contact us is a form, and at the bottom we have our footer. So that's what we were looking for. And if we check the structure here of the HTML, don't mind all the to-dos. Those are because I made a template version and this is an instance of that HTML template. But I've got my nav bar inside the header. I've got a section with the class hero. This is basically my hero section. I've got a section for my about content. Another section for my services. This one's quite long because it's got the 3 cards there. My projects is also quite long because of the content. And then my form is this contact section. These are all inside sections. And then at the end, I've got my footer. So a couple of things to note about this HTML file is 329 lines, which is kind of long. And as I've been working on this, as I was making the template for it earlier, it was sometimes annoying to try to find things. And I know that we can use like Command F and go to project. It will take me to wherever I've got project in here. Okay, that's the section I want. But still, it's just a big old HTML file. And it's the same with my CSS file. I'm not using Tailwind or styled components or any other kind of more modern way of styling because I just wanted to use the straight up CSS. So I did try to optimize this already by doing some things with variables that I reference for kind of a theme and some kind of common styles. But seriously, this is still a quite long CSS file, getting over 1,000 lines, which is fine to move around because you can. There's projects, there's about, but I still think that there's something about putting things into smaller files that I, as a dev, appreciate. And when you're opening up a large file, like this is my portfolio site, so it's pretty much just me that's ever going to be working on it, and you're seeing it. The 3 people watching this will see it, and that's fine. But what I'm trying to get at is more like an idea that would extend to general development. And so refactoring is what I want to focus on in this video for the HTML in particular. So now that we've seen how big this HTML file is, I had I had run this page speed insights to check the performance of it. So I ran this a little while ago before I refactored, and we can just see that it's already pretty good. I mean, I'm not trying to say this is an amazing site, but because it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's kind of hard to mess it up. It's kind of hard to have bad scores for these things when I'm using the very um, basic structure where not a lot can go wrong on my end. And that's why I wanted to do it too, is I just want to have something that's fast, and my site is, fast and responsive. So the current site now, you see that little kind of flash of loading things in. That's because I've refactored it now. So, and just to note before I show what's different, these scores here are for the desktop: 99, 89, 100, and 75. I can get those a bit better, but then I also refactored and ran again. It's 189, 175. It's basically the same. It's like basically no difference. But what the difference is in the structure of the code base. And for me, I I'm the one working with it, and I appreciate the changes that I made to refactor it. But if you had a client's project and you wanted to do some changes to refactor, and then the results are still like this, maybe it wouldn't necessarily be worth the effort that you spent refactoring, because the end result is a website that performs roughly the same way. Now, if you're refactoring to make it easier for yourself and future devs to improve the site, then that would be another consideration. But just to mention about refactoring, in this case, I did it more for myself and to have a better feel as I'm working on my site, because I've got this index HTML with all these to-dos which I have to fill things in, and I was kind of dreading going through and filling it in because I was just it's such a long file. So let's okay, let's cut to what I've done to refactor the HTML. So I'm just going to pull up my latest version here. So git checkout. No, main. I want to get my main branch. Okay, so it's saying I need to stash, but to be honest, I don't need anything from this last one. So I'm just going to run get stash and never get into that stash, and then check out main. Okay. So this is what I've got now. This is my HTML file. And it's only 27 lines as opposed to 329 or whatever before. And I just want to give a call out to um, when you build a new project with React, for example, or with Vue. Let me pull that up. So this website Stack Blitz has an instance of brand new React projects that was created bundled with Vite. And just to mention that when you first start up a new project like this, in the HTML file, it's also really light. Where's the HTML file? It's very small. And it's got this div ID equals root. And if you know anything about React or Vue, this is the most important div in the project, because this is where your HTML will get basically injected into your DOM from this point. And the injection happens inside, in this case, this main JSX file. So you're creating a React root, and you're putting in this app, which is going to be the entry point kind of all your React code. And then this app would likely have the reference other components that you've made for your projects. And the structure would normally be like you'd have a source folder, and inside there you've got your components. And inside this components, you'd have the individual parts of your page. And I like that a lot. And it's something I've really enjoyed when working with React, is the idea of components where you're opening up a smaller part of the project to focus in on and look at the context of and work on, without getting overwhelmed by how it relates to other parts of the project. And I think in the future I'll show some React work that I've been also doing, personal projects. But I just want to use this as an example of how what was inspiring me to do this refactoring. So getting back to my code now, we've got the index HTML, which is quite a bit smaller, and you see it's got these sections. But where did all the content go in the sections? Because the sections here look exactly the same, but before, this section for hero had all the HTML. Well, I put them in components. And because I'm not using React, I had to kind of find my own way to do this with JavaScript. Because I learned through a bit of research that HTML used to have a way to link to other HTML files. So it was a way to kind of import other HTML. But apparently it was deprecated because it would have issues. So now the I think the gold standard is to use JavaScript to manipulate the DOM that's manipulate the HTML that's rendered and put in sections kind of dynamically. So that's what I've done. So just to get back to our plan here, there were some unforeseen challenges when I refactored. I do want to check the structure quick, and we'll look at possible negatives from refactoring too. Refactoring ended up being a bigger job than I thought, refactoring the HTML here. So we've got these sections and we want to put HTML into them. So first I created a sections directory with all of the parts of my page basically. And if we check the hero, there's that same content. You notice there's nothing around it. There's no wrapper. There's no function. It's just HTML that has the same exact content that used to be inside this um, section class equals hero. And it's the same with the other sections. That's why this content in main is so short now. So how did I get it in? Well, I had to try some different things, but what I ended up doing in my JavaScript, I've got my main.js file. And really what I was doing was I want to focus on this load content and populate HTML functions. And then the point in the JavaScript when I wanted to load in this other content was the after the DOM was already created with this index HTML structure, because then it would be an appropriate time to add more HTML to it. So I use the listener, which is DOM content loaded, and I made it async. And I had to play around with this a lot because my existing JavaScript that I had on my project was doing things like, okay, let me reload here. So my existing JavaScript was doing things like when I scroll down to projects, toggle this button and immediate and kind of animate the projects in, as well as when you click on them. And if you remember, all of this, all of this content, all of these HTML elements are now inside the sections, and the sections don't get loaded right away with indexed HTML. So that meant that the JavaScript that I was running on the elements in this sections where I get them by ID and do things to them was not able to always run because of, I think it was a multi-threading issue where before I had this as async, the JavaScript here would kind of do a lot of this at the same time. So it would get the other HTML, try to put it into index.html in the DOM, try to put it into the DOM, and it would also try to add event listeners and add functionality onto elements in the DOM which weren't there yet. So that was an issue. So what I ended up doing was this asynchronous function that will first populate my HTML. And what that's doing is getting a chain of promises which are looping through the sections. And these sections have just a URL, which is it's just where it is in the directory. I've got this folder sections, and I've got the HTML file, and I've got the ID, and it's super important to use the right ID. So for example, this header has sections with an ID header, and in my HTML, header has an ID header. So what does it do? It goes through each of these, and it calls this helper function load content. And the helper function here is actually using the fetch API. So it's getting the URL, so it's actually loading, using the network, it's loading the content from these other sections, and it's getting that content, and then it's this element ID here. So it's getting the data and putting it into the right section inside my HTML. So I thought that's pretty interesting. And only after that's completed, because I'm using an asynchronous event listener here, will it then go down to my update state, where I define my other parts of my other elements that I need to do things with and get the IDs of them. But most of these are not rendered yet until after I've done my section work. So I think this has been really interesting for me to refactor the HTML like this, because I had to think about what modern projects are doing and try to recreate it for a quite low tech, minimalistic example. But I'm happy with the final result, because mainly for a developer now, I can jump into about, edit the stuff in about. I can jump into header, edit the stuff in the header. I don't need to be scrolling this giant index HTML file. And as we can see, the performance was quite similar between the non-refactored and the refactored version. But for me, it's worth it because I learned some things in this process. It's really all about learning, and that's how I see my portfolio page too. If someday I can make it really good and get a job, that would be great. My CV is probably more important for that. But what I see with everything I do with code is I see it as a way to try to refactor and learn and try something new. And you got to be curious. You got to be um, you got to be a little bit childlike, I think, to really learn. At least for me, is just to think like, that what if I did this? Wouldn't that be weird? What would happen? And just think like, you know. So that's my example for today. And just to get back to my project example here, I think my final thoughts are, although this is a bit of a forced example, because my first draft before I refactored was also pretty much the same code, I'm still happy that I did it. And it's working on real projects. Sometimes you refactor something that actually makes a big difference for the client, whether it's something with improving the loading of the site or the app or the component, or it could be a lot of things that it would improve. And there's just one last thing I wanted to check on a technical point. So before oh, you know what? Let me just run my dev instance so we can compare. Okay. So I'm going to check out the old commit again. Yeah. Okay. That doesn't look right. Oh, that's because it's the wrong project. That's why my checkout didn't work. Well, let me get back to my project that I actually want to show you here. Okay. So now that I've checked out the older version, if we open it up, this is my local instance running here. And I just want to check when I inspect. I want to look at the network. So when I load this up, there's a waterfall where the content's getting loaded. And seems like it happens within about 200 milliseconds. And if we look at what's loaded here, we can actually filter it by group by. So let's find the JavaScript. Oh, that view is so bad. Let's just go through it here. So we're getting our CSS, our font families. This is my main JavaScript that gets loaded in the network. You can see it's in that rectangle there. And then I have another little bit of JavaScript from this feather icons package that I'm loading. Here it is, the feather min JavaScript. But it's really just the main JavaScript and then the indexed HTML. That's what I'm getting. If we compare this to what's going on now in the refactored version, and we check the network, you're going to see that actually each of those sections, you can see them getting loaded. So there's my header. The loading time is a lot longer because, well, this is deployed to Cloudflare, whereas my local environment is not deployed anywhere. Okay, there's my hero, about, projects. So it's kind of cool to see that the fetch is really getting each of those sections and getting the data from them from the HTML. Well, if you enjoyed this, please let me know. If you have suggestions on what you want to see next time, or any questions, or just want to share something you've been working on, just leave a comment below. And if you have any feedback at all, I'd love to hear. Thank you. Until next time, guys, keep drinking your water. That's going to get old fast. I'm probably not going to say that after this video.